Hello, this is a follow-on from podcast episode 8, where Nathan and I were finally starting to talk about designing the show's website. And in that episode, we were working with a rough homepage mock-up and trying to improve it. This is ongoing, so it may take some time before this goes live. But in these short videos, I hope to share anything that might be interesting about the changes and in particular, the implementation of features here. And in this one, I'm looking at the light and dark mode toggle. I'm going to share the code that I'm initially going to use in the article that goes with this video, so link will be below. I also wanted to talk about my concerns over the present implementations of this feature. So offering a dark or light alternative is trending at the moment, but we're including it because it's not inconceivable it might be considered a standard in the future. And I say this because browser and in particular mobile device vendors have a good reason for wanting to offer a portable web experience that can respond to environmental light, available battery life, and what the user personally finds themselves comfortable with. And these vendors have a powerful influence on the W3C's working groups. And recently, they've been giving us new ways to work with a variety of other user preferences, such as reduced animation and data. We can cover this better when we do our planned podcast episode on user preferences. But the dark mode, which is presently forced on the site that you're stuck with for a little bit longer, is there just on a whim. We wanted enough design to make the early content presentable, and the novelty of the dark seemed to better distract from how stark it actually is. But to honor a user's system or browser preferences for light and dark is not technically difficult to do, at least with a simple design. And I'm implementing some of the new CSS in this. So if I go to my inspect tool and I go down to the root, it could be the HTML. I'm employing something that's been supported since 2020, and that is a color scheme. And here I have set it to dark. And to take control over this, we use a media query called prefers color scheme. But what this is doing in this case is, and I can show you this if I take off all my colors, is it's telling the browser to use its own user agent style seats and set those to dark. So it's giving us a dark background and light text on this. But if I set this up so it honors preferences, if I just tab along here and set it up for light dark, then it will honor someone's preferences. And as you can see, it's gone to the light version on this. Now, I haven't set this to light. It's just that I automatically have no preference on it and it goes to light then. And I can use this toggle, which we'll talk about in a moment, just to swap from those. So auto and light are obviously the same, and then it can go to dark. Now, this has been quite useful using the user agent styles with this, because when I was talking earlier about using the audio element, which is in the browser itself, it was able to provide the dark styling for me. But mostly you'll not want to do that because it is honored differently across different browsers. So there's a slightly different color scheme with all of the browsers. What we'll mostly want to do is take control and use prefers color scheme, this media query, which according to baseline is widely supported. And it's pretty easy to understand. So if we look at the CSS here, we would do our theming in a normal way. Perhaps this is a light theme and we want to support the dark alternative. So we add the media query to the prefers color scheme dark and then set up the equivalent values here. We'd probably do this against custom properties as I do to make it easier. Or we could do this in reverse. If our theme is fairly dark in the first place, we might want to offer something to those people who specifically want light and do that. Interestingly enough, although this is well supported across all of the different browsers now, it's not fully complete. In the future, we should be able to set something for people who have no preference as well. And there is something else which might make it easier to work with the CSS. This is the light dark function, which is supported in the core browsers at the moment, but not enough to meet baseline. And what this allows us to do is to set against this property the two values that we want for light and dark. This is all well and good if people know to set their preferences and are quite happy to stay with the preferences that they've set in their various devices. And they are kind of hidden away. But it really doesn't help somebody who comes to a site and doesn't know if there is the option. You need to flag that up. And they may not like, if they set it to dark, your dark version, or they might want to view some content in light, maybe perhaps an article. So in order to really give the user this choice, we really need something like a toggle so they can toggle on the particular site. But this introduces a bit of a problem, particularly for us as the no script show, because we're going with what we think the W3C's intention is. And that is for anything that's going to be commonplace. And I think they want this to be commonplace. It should be in the declarative languages of HTML and CSS, and that we shouldn't need to be a programmer to make this work. And when it comes to toggles, generally you need JavaScript. There is some hope with this because since the end of last year, we have the has selector, a relative selector, sometimes called the parent selector. And this allows us to do a lot of clever things. But the most relevant one, I can show you a demo here by Bramus Van Dam, who works for Chrome, and he's definitely someone to follow if you're interested in modern CSS. And it very much is modern CSS that he's using here. But he's been able to create this toggle between light and dark effect here with no JavaScript. And it's not so easy to understand, but what he's doing here, if I take this example, he has an input, which is a radio input, with the value of dark. And if we go to the relevant CSS, we can see here what this is effectively doing is if the input with the value of dark has been checked, then serve up the color scheme dark and the rest of the code is below. I was playing around with this one, but I still needed JavaScript to make this work. So I'd be in light mode normally, which would be no problem on this. I could move around because that's my default. But if I went to dark, we would end up with a bit of a problem. You can see my logos have been swapping around, but again, I needed to do this with JavaScript, which I shouldn't need to do. So let me just disable the JavaScript that I've got, which effectively is storing by the site those preferences that have been set in the browser's local storage. But if I take this off now, I'm fine when I'm in light, but if I go to something and I want to go into dark, you'll see that this is broken. Now, normally I would be able to swap over the logo images using the preferred color scheme with just CSS. But as soon as I get the toggle, I have to do this in JavaScript. And the experience is not great. I have to go back to dark if I want it on dark, and I go here. And somehow I think this is worse than not having anything at all. So it's left me with the situation where there isn't really something which is perfect at the moment. But the code that I'm going to use is something which I set up for a client about a year ago, and it is using JavaScript. I won't go into all of the details about how this is picking up on preferences and storing them. The key thing to know about this is that it's not really using any of these modern techniques. On the click of a button with a certain ID, it's adding a class of dark mode. And if we go over to the CSS, what we've got is our regular styling and our variables is over here. And we're using the cascade to put the dark mode below. So the dark mode class gets added when we click on it, and then it applies these styles. And for the button, let's just go over to that. There's the ID that goes with it. I've added an ARIA label so screen readers understand what it is. And then we get into another dilemma about the UI on the site that I initially did for clients. I didn't think they would understand icons, so I put the text in saying light and dark. Here I've put both of them. Some people put one or the other with this. So I've not spent too much time on it. It's got a bit of interaction, but it's generally done with a bit of cheating here. With the dark mode, when that comes on, I invert the icon colors there with this filter, and I put a little bit of rotate as well on the active state. So I wasn't too happy with this video, but I did see something that gave me a little bit of hope. Bramus, who we mentioned earlier, has just put out a number of days ago this toggle here as a bit of a experiment just to make the case that he believes this should be part of a browser, that on a site-by-site basis that you can turn on light and dark mode. And this is just one of those tests with it, which I think would solve a lot of problems and stop us needing JavaScript if it could be working. I can see one issue with this in the sense that it doesn't have a light or dark mode, so I'm clicking for no reason. But anyway, I just wanted to end on this. We'll talk about it in the future podcast. Thanks so much for listening. I hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.